I guess it's time for a new live coding session. Let's get started. Doing a few bit of setup still here. Moving some windows out of the way. We don't need that. We need this. And let's get started. Right. So, yet another episode in the streaming. So let's see. So last week we ended up with a nice interactive version of our command. Let's have a look at that in a moment. I think, let me see, I'm going to pull up, I think, one page that I wanted to show you actually already last week. And that is a page that actually, not this one, wait, let me do that from here. A page that I may have shown already before, but I wanted to show again. And that's the physically based rendering book. And I like this book not just because it's about implementing a render engine, physically based rendering engine, but this book is also written in the literate style, with the literate paradigm. So the idea is that when you read this book, it's freely available on this URL, pbr-book.org. When you read this book, you actually read the code of the entire rendering engine. So let's see, for instance, maybe this primitive interface and geometry primitives. It tells you a lot about how these work, but then you have these fragments with code, and this is far more advanced than the current plugin I have, and in the future I hope to get features like this in my plugin as well. Things like, let me allow the PBR book here, where you can where there a fragment is mentioned, you could just in that place expand that fragment and see the code in there. So compared to my compared to my current implementation, for instance, this part you don't see, don't have an option yet to expand this kind of fragments. It would be nice to have, and there are more nice features like a primitive interface here, as it's mentioned here. This primitive interface fragment is being added and expanded on several times in this chapter. So there are these small navigation triangles like this. You can go to the next part it's being used, and again to the next part. Primitive interface gets expanded and going back like this. So if you are interested in writing rendering engines, this book is a really good book to go through, and have also a very good example of literate programming where it works really well, especially in this this way of web pages. It's really useful. So hello Lucas and Yoon, thank you for joining. I hope we're having a nice session today. Let me see. I'm going to move around a bit some of my winds on the other screen so I can actually see what's going on in a better way. Just a moment. And maybe resize the other window. I don't need to see what you guys are seeing being streamed again, so that's a bit out of the way. Right, so currently this is our status, and I've been reading a bit through the code that we have written, and been thinking about why debugging doesn't work properly, and I actually noticed a few bugs. So the first bug is here actually, net 4.8. The target framework that we are targeting is .NET 4.8, but to express it correctly, it should be net 4.8. And the other part is that debug simple files, the PDB files that are being created currently, are created incorrectly. They are actually done with the portable format, and what we really need is the full format. And I did a bit of testing and it seems to work, so I think we're going to just make those changes now and then and get to the project. So again, here's the first bug. To have the project compile as a Rhino plugin, we need to target .NET 4.8, which is true, but we need to fix this. So let's double click this. Oh, I did that, but it did not nicely change here. Sometimes it nicely jumps to the text of the .literate file and then minimizes the preview essentially. So this is the first fix you need to do. And I kind of already made some changes on that. It also means that the location where the project gets built is net 4.8 instead net 4.8 in the path of the out directory. So I already reloaded the plugin once, but if you haven't, if you have done something like this for yourself, you'll need to first remove the old version of the old build, essentially, of the plugin. So let me show my Explorer file, Explorer window, file Explorer window. So this is the new location, debug net 4.8, and there used to be then here also net 4.8. And to make sure that that is not being loaded anymore, the plugin from that old location, first close all your Rhino instances, so there's no Rhino anymore holding on to the RHP file, and then delete the folder with everything in it. With this change in, you can then build. But before we do the building again here, I'm going to make a couple of more changes, and that is that for this project at this moment we're going to do it such a way that the PDB files are going to be always generated with full debug symbols. So we are going to look at where the project properties is. So we have here, we want to use the RHP target extension. And we have these live code project properties, so the disabling of default items and generating of assembly info is also disabled. So at this end, just before we're going to start creating the plugin class, I'm going to add a bit of text that says to be able to debug, and I'm going to debug with Visual Studio, to be able to debug using the .NET framework, or maybe I should say using the Windows PDB format. This needs to be configured in the project settings. We want to use the full format of the for PDBs for PDB files, and not the portable format. Let's also do this. Furthermore, for now, we want to enable full debug symbols. And because I don't recall exactly how that was done, I'm going to peek in a moment. But for now, we're going to expand the fragment. So that's XML, and that's going to be Yester live code project properties. Let's extend it. Oh, not minus. Like so. And that is going to be. Oh no, I have to peek a little bit. I had to find this out by using actually a Visual Studio code or Visual Studio and changing settings. So we want debug type full and debug symbols true. Well, let's just copy paste. We want to be as lazy as possible. So we don't need the indent here. Oh, I should have done 2 dedents. So the debug type is set to full, and debug symbols always enabled. To enable, let's put it that way, to enable debug symbols at all times. In the future we may put these two in a conditional setting where these are enabled only when we are building a debug build. At the moment we are always building a debug build, but for now, especially when we are still building the plugin, whenever we do a release build, it's still useful to have debug symbols turned on. So these 2 fixes should actually allow me to put breakpoints, and it does. Yes, indeed, 7.13 service release finally got released, and it contains a couple of fixes also by me for preventing a crash with changing HDR files of environments, especially when ray traced is active in a viewport. And the other fix was rendering on OpenCL devices, specifically AMD, because that's essentially what we support. What happened was that I had enabled or taken into use a feature, background lighting, in Cycles, and this feature is always compiled in with the CUDA kernels and the CPU kernels. But for the OpenCL kernels, it was not actually enabled. I have hard-coded a set of settings for this compilation step. And what happened was that after everything was compiled for an AMD GPU, and you'd start a ray traced or Rhino render session, Cycles would start loading all the kernels for rendering. And then at some point it would start Well, actually, it would notice that in the settings, background light, so background sampling was required. It's for HDRI lighting essentially, and it would then look if the program or the kernel for that feature was available yet. It would notice that, okay, we don't have this kernel yet. Let's wait for it. And since in our case for cycles, we do compiling of the OpenCL kernels of the main process in a separate process, and then only after the compilation is finished of all the kernels, we set a flag in cycles, or in Rhino actually, to tell that the kernels are available. There's no other moments where we compile anymore. So essentially cycles would then be at that point waiting for the background program to become available. It never happens because it was not being compiled in. So the fix was to make sure that this background kernel gets compiled on the in that sub process, or in a separate process, which is done by a separate program that ensures compiling of the kernels. Yoon asks if it's changing in the middle causes problem. I guess you're asking about changing environments while having ray trace. So that indeed was causing problems. Something had changed inside maybe a Rhino, or maybe due to change in maybe the .NET framework. But essentially what it meant was that while I got events about changes to the environment, I would be querying an environment that I already had a handle on on the managed side, but suddenly the unmanaged version of this environment, on which I essentially relied, had already been collected. So somewhere someone had just pulled out the memory from under that instance, which caused then a crash. And how I fixed it was by essentially making a deep copy of that environment every time I get a new one. And through that I can ensure that this environment does not get disposed or collected before I'm done with it. So that's what in 7.13 on in my code, in the Rhino cycles code. So let's get back to our plugin. Let's actually see if Control-Shift-P, if we can generate now our new project file. Let's see, does it still look correct? Yeah, so there's now this extra white line, and the .NET target is correct. And I actually set up a task to do the build. So I can now press F5 or use I use Ctrl-Shift-P to run a build task. So Ctrl-Shift-P and then run build task, and then there's the one build task, so like this. And I use .NET. I forgot to actually press the button. Let's do that again. I always forget that there's this one more step to do. Right, output. So here we have built our code. .NET is the command which I, in the previous sessions, I did just on the command line. So I'm no longer going to do that on the command line. I'm going to use the build task with arguments build, and then since this is being run in the top of the workspace folder, which is this. Oh, that's not going to be useful. Which is this part until RHI, so Rhino CS. That's where the .NET is being run, but we need to build the code that lives in yesterlife code. So that's why I also put in yesterlife build. And now that we have a task called build, then actually in our launch settings, I can now actually enable the pre-launch task. So now, oh, actually, I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to debug actually in here. So, well, why not leave it there? So I've still found that using CLR debugging, which should be the Windows tooling debugging the old .NET framework 4.8 and prior debugger, it still doesn't work. We can do actually just a quick test. Let's see, I don't have any old Rhinos open. No. So let's just go here. This is now set to start Rhino for debugging. Let's do the debugging. I think I have yes, I have this breakpoint. So the idea is that what I want to check now is when this breakpoint hits, do we see local variables like the draw-e variable and anything else that's visible in this scope. So let's see. And also, yes, I have now updated my local Rhino version to the latest service release candidate, which is in this case 7.14. The first one that also got released at the same time as 7.13. Takes a moment. Let's see. Yester box. It's not loaded, so that's not working as I want to. But that's not too bad. Actually, I'm not sure why it's not loading the debug symbols to begin with. This morning when I quickly tried, I believe it did load the symbols. I have loaded. Let's double check that the plugin is actually loaded from the location I think it's loaded. I believe I removed all old versions. Just let's double check. Yesterlife code. Let's go to the details page. And it says it's under net 4.8 indeed. So it should have access to the symbols. Let's see, did I have in the debug console everything in here? Let's see, where's my plugin? Where's the plugin? So many things in the output. Let's make this a bit larger. Actually, maybe search for RCS. Oh yes. So indeed, this is what I did see this morning as well, and this is why also the next step was to try this in Visual Studio. But I don't right now. I don't really understand why it says this, because my understanding is that the type of debugger being used now is not the .NET Core debugger. So I'm not sure yet what's going on here. So it would be nice to have this figure out. So we may have a look at that later in stream. It depends a bit on how things go. But I wanted to just now quickly show how this works with Visual Studio Code then. So let's start again Rhino, just normally without the Visual Studio Code debugger attached. Rhino 7, we start it, and I have already loaded Visual Studio Code with only the project. I'm not going to make changes here. and not going to save the solution either. But this allows me to set a breakpoint. I have one here. And I have already attached to the process before, but the way to do that is just attach process. Make sure it's on managed code, and search for Rhino. I'm going to attach to this. Okay, so the plugin is not yet loaded. So where's my Rhino? So I'm going to now menu load it. Just running the yesterbox command also should load it, but just for clarity's sake, let's load it through the plugin manager. So tools, options, plugins, and then let's show only the plugins that do not ship with Rhino. Yestercode live, right click it, and then a load plugin. See, in Visual Studio now you can see that the debug symbols have been loaded. So that's what we want. Now as a test, yesterbox, and how peculiar. I'm pretty sure that this morning this did work. It's loaded. I saw all the locals. Well, not very useful, I must say. I suppose we can go look at this in more detail later on, but it just means that most likely we need to just rely on old school debugging skills like printing to the output. Let's try one more time. Debug or reattach to the process, as I am on these. Let me check what the current settings are for the project. Maybe there's something there. So target framework is set there, and build says in advanced it says full, which is what we want. Right, well, this should be fine. Well, let's try one more reattaching, and then if it does not work, not dwell longer on this. Are we attached now? Yes. Our breakpoints are loaded. Our breakpoint, there's only one. And then, okay, we are broken in here. Let's step a little bit into this. Or not into the base, but still not here. Very peculiar, but let's not get hung up on this. Too bad. It worked so nicely this morning. Well, that's tools for you. Sometimes it works, and when you're doing something, when other people are watching, then it doesn't. That's our life. Demo effect, I guess. Full, true. Well, one more thing I could try is make sure that the Rhino is closed. Where's my file explorer? I'm just going to remove this folder. Shift delete. Okay, that went fine. Now let's build. Control Shift P and run build task. Build. And it's there now. Debug. Net. It's in there. So let's start Rhino again. Oh. One thing that does come to mind, that maybe I tried a local developer build, but it should work with this as well. It ought to work. So let's just run our box command 1, so it's now loaded. Let's be happy with that. Where's my Visual Studio Code? So I'm going to close some old ones because we don't need those. Not that one. Hello Rhino code. Not very interesting, but I was looking a little bit into how the localization mechanism works, and that's what we're going to do in a moment, or at least we're going to try. And it's going to be interesting because there's all sorts of things that also I have to find out. Right. Right. Drawing a blank here. What was I doing? Oh yes, Rhino started, and then we wanted to attach to this process, so reattach to process. We've already attached to Rhino, so it just should work. And indeed we have loaded symbols. And let's go to Rhino again and run the command again. No, still no symbols here, no locals to be seen. Maybe all the locals are out on holiday. Who knows? Well, sad for us, but just means old school tools, right? Printing to the output. Not ideal, but it's how lots of code has been debugged over all the decades of software writing in human history. Okay, so localization, something I have not done before in a plugin, in such a sense that I have done some of it, but I have been very lucky to have been able to just rely on other people doing most of the work, which is always nice. Let me pull up Rhino cycles code. Just a moment, like here. So in the end, how it is going to look like somewhat is I have here my device section, and this is the section that you see when you go to tools, options, and then the cycles page, where you can see, for instance, the devices that you can select. And there's this device section that has a caption called device settings. You can see we have your localize string pair, where we have the English string, and then using a localization class, and the localization class comes from Rhino.ui namespace. And let's switch back to cycles code. It's calling the localize string that takes two parameters. So let's look at localize string with two parameters. This one is using string English, so it's the English name, and then a context ID. And from my understanding how this works is that you can have different languages installed, and I did that with at least a test with my local debug. Let me show what I did to get that working, assuming I can get my other file explorer. So this is going to be a bit hacky, and mainly also because I don't really know how this really works, but I know how to ensure that there is that you have something to work with. So normally when you install Rhino, you should be able to install language specs. And let me go to app settings. Let's show this as well. No, wait. So let me see. Oh, there's a little bit big window. Let me resize it. So in my applications, I have Rhino installed, and if you want more language specs, you click on modify, and yes, I want to modify, and then you get this installer video, or not video, window dialog, and click on modify, and then you can select languages. And these are all the languages that we have localized to. But I was thinking that it would be interesting to see if I can myself add support for Finnish, because Finnish is what I know. All very cool languages. I've started a little bit trying to learn Korean, at least reading, but the amount of time I put into it means that I don't know Korean. I suppose I could do French or German as well, but doing things the hard way is always more fun. So what I'm going to do now is show how I've kind of figured out how to add Finnish to the installed languages, even if there's no installation done yet. So this we don't need. So what I did in my local debug build was add a new package. I just actually copied the default language that you have, English, and then renamed the file to localization, and then in parentheses phi-phi. So that's Finnish locale. How did I get there? Well, in program data McNeil Rhinoceros, and if you don't know the program data folder, due to settings on your machine, it could be a different folder. Most likely it's just going to be program data. But if you don't know the exact location, you can always do percentage program data percentage, and then select McNeil and Rhinoceros. And 7.0, that's going to be for your user install, and on that you have at least packages, and in the very least you have n-us installed, and Yoon probably has Japanese installed, so he should have here another package as well. And what Rhino does at the beginning is look at this folder for all the .rhi files with this form of name, and then look at the locale name n-us, and in the case of my debug build, I added this one, localization phi-phi. So if I understand correctly how this works, and let's also look at this one for instance, essentially this is going to be used somehow internally. So when the locale is set to something different than English, so that's a locale ID of 1033, then I believe Rhino is going to look at the assembly first in the assembly location if there is a XML file that contains the translations. Let me quickly look up the translation files for Rhino cycles. What is going to be the easiest? Let me ponder there for a bit. So I think if I look at I'm looking now at the screen or window off screen, but I'm trying to remember where the locale files are actually installed. And I believe, if I'm just going to search for XML files here, so let's pull in this other file. I mean window. Oh man, I think I need to clean out my trackball a bit because let's do, I think it's a localization. Oh, that's not it set. Session asterisk. Let's try with that first. No matches, right? Oh, that's not an asterisk. My asterisk is that. At least localization folder, but that's not really what we want. We need XML files, I believe. Let's search for .xml. Well, why not? Let's have a look at the contents of these files. Oh. And it may very well be that we do need these kind of extra files. There's error reporting and this package. What does that do for us? This is telling us where these are found. Oh, this is for all the render content. And to be honest, I'm not really interested in those. Let's look up the localization files for Rhino cycles. And that's going to be probably somewhere very useful. How do I get that? Let me think a moment. I think many things. That one we don't need. I'm going to do this a bit off screen. So let me open a folder where I know there's some localization files. We don't need to see all of them, so that's why I do it off screen. Yeah, I'll show you in a moment the LCID. Actually, where is the localization? Oh, here's the localization. Parts. And Rhino, and then, well, for instance, why not the check? And then Rhino cycles. Let's close the other files. Just a moment, I'm almost there. I think I'm just going to clean the trackball in a moment. So the XML file for Rhino cycles has this, so it's an XML file indeed, and the top tag RMA localization, and then it has to be RMA string of type string, the English one, and then the localized one. In this case it's this Czech language. So Rhino cycles disable GPU, Rhino cycles deaktivovat. I don't know how to say GPU in Czech. Or GPUs for Rhino cycles have now been disabled. GPU pro Rhino cycles is only deaktivovani, aby se zmena, yeah, and so on. Well, those are the strings that we need to have also for our project, and I believe that these are supposed or looked up first next to the assembly where our code lives in, so in the RHP. And let's find out if that's actually going to work. And again, I have no idea how this actually works. This is the very first time I do this. So what I use in Rhino cycles work, I just add some macros where I tell this is the string that we want to show, and then someone or some bot runs a script for me and replaces this all and sets up the translation files for our translators who localize all the strings to their respective languages, and then we end up with a file like this. So I'm gathering that we can do this automatically. I'm sorry, not automatically, manually. So we have here English with the text you want to localize. Like for instance, next one, the GPUs have been disabled and so on. After each string, there's this in double square brackets, there's a number. And this number is also visible what you give as the context. So there was this earlier one for device section, there's 14. So let's see if you can find 14 in this file. 14, right? So device settings. So indeed we need to create then in our manual file, translation file, which I'm going to do for finish, one that has this top tag RMA localization, and I believe it's just the one, yeah, just the one top tag, and then a whole bunch of RMA string tags with these attributes that need. I'm not sure if this file name attribute is needed, but let's add that anyway, and then do all this context part completely manually. But just have every time we have a new string, you just manually bump that string, and then like this we are going to either do just this part, localization, localized string. So just if we just need the string right there to do that, or if we have a case where we need a like this M caption here, that is a localized string pair where there's a little bit extra logic to show the correct string. But I believe if I scroll down here, like here for instance, the thread count, we have directly this localized string, just that part. So I think we should be able to just use that. Lots of thinking out loud. I quite like that. So what do we need? So we need to create a new XML file. We need to ensure that it gets copied to the location of the RHP file, and I think I'm just going to put it for now just next to all the other code file parts. So let's go to our here at the very end of our document, and or no, maybe not at the end of the document. So well, let's just first do the I'm first going to show how I figured out how I made sure that I can actually use the language, Finnish language, even though we have not added this to Rhino itself. So let me pull up my debug version and then of Rhino, and then also show again the package file, the packages location. So what I did first was to edit a Python script, and then I like to do this a lot to figure out things about Rhino before actually writing code that's going to be used as in a plugin or things like that, just to do quick Python tests, because that allows us to write code while Rhino's running without having to compile everything. So what we need to figure out now is, are we running in English language or not? And I happen to know that let's also first import rhino.localization, rhino.ui I mean, because that is the namespace that gives us local access to the localization class. So first one thing that we can check is rhino.ui.localization. It's a static class, and then current language ID. So let's print that. What was that? So, and then oh, come on, I failed typing the closing parentheses. Okay, that's better. And the other one we can use is rhino.ui.localization dot wait, what's the other one? Let's scroll down here a bit. I believe it was current language, running as English, and it will give us a boolean. And let's see what this gives us. So 1035 and false. So 1035 is the LCID for Finnish, and I looked it up on the internet. And first, what I tried to do to ensure or to try set Rhino to Finnish language, and it is currently set. This debug build is set to Finnish language, even though everything is English. It's because I don't have any localized strings at the moment. So so what I did was rhino.application settings .appearance settings. Under that there is the current, no wait, what was it called? Language identifier, yes. So let's first, so this is something that you can get or set. And what I had done was just, before I had added the fi.fi package, just try this, run it, and then restart Rhino. So I tried this, so run this. And actually, let's for kicks now, or just so that's clear, let's try set this to the Dutch LCID, language code ID, and Dutch is going to be 1043. And remember, I don't have yet 1043. I don't have that yet set as an installed language. I didn't do the package creation yet. So let's see if I rerun this. I tried setting it to 1043. Actually, you won't see that right away because Rhino does not like, or does not do anything on mid-session language change, and that's also why you, if you change this via the tools options, appearance settings, when you change the language there, you have to always restart Rhino. So in this case also, well, maybe let's copy paste this. I don't want to write this again. Well, maybe just save it, it's even better. Let's do, where shall I put this? Oh, this is not a good location. I have other locations. Param param. That's going to put it under documents, and then no, wait, projects. Oh, I don't recall anymore where I did put it. Did I put it over here? RH, no. Documents. How poor is that? Projects, no. Rhino, no. So what is my projects called? Lots of games there. Oh, Pi, yes. And then over here, let's put it over here. I'm going to put a proof of concept language changing, so we don't have to write this again. So I set this now to 1048. Internally in the settings, the application settings, is now been changed, but we have to reload Rhino. But the current problem is, and let's do the reload. When we run this again, we don't have a Dutch package here. So Rhino is going to look at these packages and see that there's only English and Finnish installed. Finnish is installed, it's not really installed. But I'm tricking Rhino. So if I'm going to run that script again, I'll edit Python script. What is this all about? What did I run? Let me see, did I run the correct Rhino? Debug, build, Rhino debug. Oh, I guess I ran the... I should have run the debug. Let's just run this one again. So Rhino is at startup is looking in this folder and determines what languages are installed, what .rhi files are in there, and it looks at locales, and from those locales it finds out the LC IDs. Let's see, is this now the correct one? Edit Python script. Right, I had the wrong Rhino started. So previously I had set this one. Let's for now comment this out. Let's see what current language ID is, and it's going to say, I believe 1033 or 1035, and that's because I guess while we are setting the 1043, since that is not an installed language, the setting does not stick properly and it refers to the previous one. At least that's what I'm surmising here from the behavior. So I'm going to rerun this part with this one enabled. Or actually, before I do that, I'm going to do that copying. Maybe just do the copying before I start Rhino. And then maybe, who knows, maybe even that time works. So I'm going to copy, oh, not to run this one, cancel. That's what you get when you have just click an item in the File Explorer and then it runs right away, or does the default action. So I'm going to copy this. Let's do that, just manual stuff. So Control C, Control V, and let's go up and then F2. Let's take this out and then do this NL-NL. And Dutch is then, based on this, Rhino on startup will find the third file as well and add to its installed languages array the number 1043 as well, 1043. Okay, let's start Rhino. And don't let me down, Rhino. I'm talking otherwise weird things to people wondering what I'm going on about. If you don't work as I tell you how you should. There. Edit Python script. Let's see what's going on. So let's run this one with 1043 on, or maybe let's first try it without it. So let's see, like this. So 1035. Let's enable this. And actually there was another one. I'm not sure if it's that going to be useful. Oh yeah, that's not going. No, sorry. There was another function that I tried to use, but then realized it's not working when running just normal Rhino. It's working actually only useful. It's useful only for when you doing something like a Rhino inside, I believe, or maybe just Rhino common somehow. Something. Forgot the details. So let's run this. Okay, now we tried setting it to this setting, and then I believe we have to restart Rhino again, and if all goes well we should have the current language ID set to 1043 if I'm reading the language code listing correctly. I searched something and I'm on the free Pascal wiki page. Wait a moment, I'm going to clean that ball a little bit. So my trackball, I'm going to push out from the back. I'm going to push out that ball. Now, come on, don't let me down. Ah, come on, you can do it, There, so I've taken out the ball, and I now need to clean out this hole. There's over time dust and other grime builds up in the thing, and let's see if there are is there some light maybe? There are 3 tiny ball bearings in here on which the trackball can freely rotate. That's true. Good build. Oh, I have even compressed air. Let's do that quickly. So a little bit less dust and grime build up there should make it much easier for me to be more accurate in scrolling around. And I use the trackball because there's not much room on my desk. So let's see. Much better. So let's move this browser window. So I'm looking at this language code page, and Dutch from the Netherlands is NL and 1043, and they're a bit down here. Finnish 1035. So that's where I got the numbers from. I assume this is all perfect. The internet never lies, you know. Let's start Rhino again. So in theory, the next time I run the script with that setting disabled on line 4, let's do that. Control save. Oh, save like this, and let's run this. Look at that. So since that package file now is there, even though we didn't do anything with it, since Rhino saw this locale nl-nl, I was able to set this language identifier to 1043 because Rhino now recognized this. So we have now two languages installed. We told Rhino about the fact that these languages exist. Let's change it back to Finnish. Well, I'm not sure why I'm doing that, but I guess I want to be continuing with what we started with. So we have now a way to tell Rhino that there is a language. I guess you could create this empty file, probably even just an empty text file, and just rename the txt to rhi, and then just have that in place. So with this mechanism, for you, if you're doing it with a regular build, it should be in here, of course. You should be able to have Rhino know about different languages than it actually knows about. And now we are going to add to our command this one localized part. So we have our command, and we're going just to do the name. And actually we could do all these text as well. Let's start with just the name. So our English name's here. And if we want to have also the, guess why are you not? It's being annoying again via Visual Studio Code. So essentially we should rewrite the documentation a bit, that we are now no longer doing the minimal, but we can add here, we also want to try a localize our plugin. To that end, we need to override the local name property, I believe. Property. Let me look up our documentation. I have that open, of course. This one. And it's always good to look at documentation again. Plugin, and then we had oh no, not plugin, sorry, it should be command, right? So Rhino commands, we're doing a command, Rhino command, and for that we have indeed the English name. We're going to override the local name, and that's just public, I believe. Yes, public, not protected, public. So let's do that. Oh, like this. So the local, that's not a good backtick. Better. And also not that. But backtick here. Right, so let's do C#. We're going to add first command overrides plus equals plus, right, like that. That's going to be public override string a local name, and that is going to return equals So arrow localization, that's not a Z, it's a Q, localization dot localize string, and that's going to be yester box, and then that is going to be the first string we do, and that really should be it. Note that we do need the need access to the localization class of the Rhino.ui. Oh man, like so. UI namespace. Oh, let's add still here. I probably should learn the shortcuts for doing markup, so that I can just select a word and then hit the markup shortcut to do like italicization or bolding or whatever I want to do. The triple backtick I have programmed as a special key combination on my keyboard. Did we already have our command usings? No, we don't have that yet. So first command usings is going to need C#. So C# first command usings, extend it with using Rhino.ui. What are you doing now? That was the wrong leader key. So let's do Ctrl+Shift+P and generate that code. Let's look at the command code for a moment. Maybe I have to already open here. It's the box command. So we have now localization.localize string yesterbox1 and using Rhino.ui. And when we run this, since we don't have anything installed, it should just show yesterbox, or the command should run as yesterbox. But just because we're going to test first for a moment, let me do it in such a way that we're not going to do the localization this cool. I'm going to call this yester laatikko. So laatikko is Finnish language, and now actually whatever language we are having set, it's going to always return, the local name is always going to return laatikko. So if you're not interested in whatever language is selected other than English, you always want to, for instance, return Japanese, because why not? You could just do hard code the string like this. So let's see, did I create the code? Ctrl+P literate process, and then we are going to run the build. Did that work out fine? Yes. And let's run the debug version, I guess. Yes, let's do the debug version. I think I need to drag the plugin still on top of that version. Let's just do it regardless of whether I did that before. So the plugin is now loaded, and do yester. You can see it's now yester laatikko, and that's because our locale or language identifier is currently set to something else than 1033. So if it were 1033, it would show here yesterbox. And if you didn't know yet, then you do know the English language version of the command, not the localized version. You can always use that name with the underbar or underscore prefix. So underbar yesterbox is going to work like that. And let's do this with yesterlaatikko, and that also works. So next step, let's try adding the localization file. So we are going to go back to using localization.localize string, and we're going to add here a new chapter, I guess, or new section. Let's see, implementing, that was two pounds or hash signs there, pound signs. Let's do localizing the command. Earlier we used localization.localize string to set up our code for localized versions of the command yesterbox. We are now going, we need now the localization files, that are formatted with XML. The files should be located next to the RHP file our project generates. So let's have a look again at our project setup code. So we have here this part, source files, and we're going to add our XML files here as well in this item group where also the source files are. We probably could make a new item group. I don't see the benefit of that at the moment. So yesterlive code source files, we're going to extend that with at least the finished one. For this project, let's try to localize some strings to Finnish and Dutch. I'll type, or we'll type up the steps we did in File Explorer later. For now, we are going to assume that setting that the correct language identifier has been set some way, set with Python in a separate script. For Finnish, the LCID is 1035, and for Dutch it is 1043. Oh, let's do Finnish localization first. Localization. So we are going to create a new file. And we do that this way. So that's going to be XML. Yesterbox finish localization dot asterisk equals, and then the file name. So that's going to be yester live code. And I believe it was, let's look at the one file we had already open here. Oh, it was not this one. It was, did I close it? No, it's this one. So it's locale name and then the assembly name. So that's going to be phi-phi and then yester live code. I believe did we call the RSP that? Yes, right. Let's just verify. Yester live code.rhp. So let's get back to our code. So it's going to be phi-phi yester live code.xml, and then we also need to add that to XML. It's the project file. That's going to be yester live code source files equals plus, because that's negative, plus we are going to extend it with exactly that file name. So what we do is now, I believe our file type is going to be none, or the tag, I believe. Let's see. I think it needs to be none, because it's just extra data we want. Well, we'll see soon enough if it ends up in the place where we need it. So this is going to be yester live code slash phi yester live code.xml, and inside this, because we want this copied to the output directory, we're going to do copy to output directory always. Copy to output directory, and then we need to close the none tag, and here we start with XML. Let's just look at the check version. Maybe just copy paste, right? Because we want to be lazy. Delete that and that and that and that. Right, and then we also need still the RMA localization tag. Wait. Select, copy, and then paste. And of course we need to explain this still a bit. Let's paste it again for the closing tag. Oh. And since we have only the one string, is going to add the one string. Just copy paste again this one into our file, and English is going to be yesterbox, and since it's our first string context ID is going to be 1 in double square brackets, and then yester tico also 1, and the file name we are doing this in is for yesterbox command cs. That should be it. So let's generate our code. Yes, that looks fine. Oh, that's not the correct one. Control Shift P. No, that's also not the correct key combination again. Control Shift P and then literate process first. Process completed, so that was fine. Let's also build this. I probably should make a task that does the literate process part also before that. So I missed something. Yesterbox command. I did add that to using Rhino.ui locally. Oh, typo. Localization. Localization. So that was in our command. Creating a command. So it goes to show that making no typos is better than making typos. Localization. Oh. Localization. Localization. Right. Let's process this first. Process was good. And then build. Oh, not good. Could not copy the file. Yes, the live code. Let's look at our project file. What does it look like? Oh, yes. So I'm being dense again. I forgot that our project file is, of course, in the same folder as yesterday live code, the rest of the code. So this is a superfluous bit. Control Shift process, literate process, Control Shift P, build task, build. Okay, that was fine. Now we look at our output and look, there we have our file. And does it look correct? So we have our localization file with one localized string. And again, I don't know if this is actually going to work, but based on the documentation that I read a little bit in our code actually, I am led to believe that for this should work, that our XML or our localization XML file should be next, or to load it, it's being looked at inside this part, right? I mean, next to the assembly that's going to load it. So here goes nothing, I guess. Fingers crossed, please. At least this loaded. No crashing yet. Tools, options, plugins. And yes, I'm running a debug version, so plugins debug as well. That's the old plugin. UI. It's not loaded yet. So let's see. Load plugin. This all still worked. So now the theory is, if we look again at our code before we do anything, our code, realized code, we have our yesterbox command. Our theory is that if now the Finnish localization has been loaded correctly, then we should get yesterlaatikko in our UI when I type yester as the first part. If it does not, it will just show yesterbox. So this is going to be exciting. Let's not do voicing in all places. Yester. Oh, it did not work. Let's just double check in that Python script that we are still in that locale. $10.35. Yes, that should be fine. we're not running as English. It may be helpful to attach this document along with it. What document are you talking about, Yoon? Are you talking about the phi-phi localization.xml file? Let me see if we had the Czechian one here. You know, that maybe easiest would be to. Okay, I'm going to close this one, and then I'm going to start my regular Rhino. Oh no, not the regular Rhino, Rhino. No, so Rhino, and then just install that. Rhino. Okay, that didn't work. Rhino. That is not Rhino. 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 Yes, it's hard to type sometimes. And let's just modify this and actually install that. Install, for instance, the Czech version, and then search where that file is being installed to. So Czech. And why not Japanese, Korean? So install now. It will now quickly download those, should be fast. They are about 90 megabytes, I believe. This looks really. Okay, 2 already downloaded, and then still the Czech version, right? And let me pull up in the meantime on the other screen this one. Oh, not on the other screen, but just move it out a little bit for a moment. And let's go to program files, Rhino 7. It's going to be in the localization folder where it's getting realized. So you see now that those files are downloaded now. And I believe if I now start Rhino, it should install or run these Rhino installers. So let's do that. I don't need that anymore. So indeed, it's now on my other screen. It's now telling me Prosím čekejte, something like that. Probably applying updates or something like that, or updating toolbars. I believe it's telling always in the UI. So let's see. Oh, great! It's now in Czech. Well, now that it's done, I believe if we look now in application data, well, let's go up first. 7. License manager desktop. We don't want that. So we're going to app data, and it is percentage app data percentage backslash and then McNeil Rhino Ceros Rhino Ceros backspace 7.x 7.0 I mean. Let's go in there, and then in localization we should have now a Czech version as well. So let's see if I understand where all the XML files are going. So we have here a huge XML file. What is this? Does this have what we want? let's look for device. Oh, this one. Let's look for device settings. It's not in there, so let's think a bit. Device. So this is just Rhino itself. I need to figure out where the other XML files are. Well, how else are we going to find out, right? Let's search for CS. Oh, let's search for CS CZ Rhino cycles.xml. Nothing in here. The question becomes, where is this? I really don't know, to be honest. Again, my understanding was that loading this from would happen from. Yeah, I'm looking now in that location. Can you also find the localization files for Rhino cycles? So I'm going to look for asterisks Rhino cycles.xml, right? There are no matches in there. So as you can see here, I'm in Rhinoceros 7.0 localization and CZ for Czech language. But I wonder if then this is under plugins or something like that. So let's see at the plugin settings. No, it's not under there either. So just to double check that it actually is there. I guess it's let's guess. Oh great, so tools would be Telesco, and then no. I probably should have picked German or something like that because Japanese nor let's do oh, what is this doing? Oh, precause is I guess command. So I need to type something like dash option, no, not dash, underbar options page and that, and then we want cycles. So this is being localized. Now if our documentation was a little bit better on this part, it would be really helpful. There was this Rhino guide that I briefly looked into. Let me pull that up. So under developers guides. So here I looked first, and there's a localizing plugins or plugin toolbars is the only part that really is in there, and it is different from what we really want. We don't want to localize the toolbar, we want to localize actual plugin. And let me search this page just to be sure. Oh. Oh, wait, this one. Local No, I didn't want that. There's nothing in there. And then if we look in our developer samples, let's look at here, the top, looking for localization. There's only bits and pieces in C++, so that's not going to really work. Anyway, at least we have our command code now set up such a way that we should be able to have stuff localized. Now need to figure out where these files need to go to. Maybe since these RHIL files are actually where's the other one? Are actually zip files. Maybe we could use that to our advantage to investigate that a bit. So let's look at. Now we have to go back to the program data. So percentage program data percentage \McNeil. Then we go to rhinoceros 7 packages, and then just let's look at this one. Right click and then open Ava. Well, to be honest, I'm confused about this, how this is supposed to work. Error reporting is in here. Then there's all the render content, and that's not really useful. The only useful looking place is now this one. So maybe if we look at the installed locations, I'm going to pull up my program files folder. You get to see that in a moment. Program files, Rhino. Let's actually search here for asterisk Rhino cycles XML. Well, that did not work as I thought it would. No matches. So maybe Rhino is still putting stuff in a completely different location than I thought it was. Or languages. Let's see. System, languages. This is for Bongo dialogues. I guess Bongo has its own system of doing this. Well, so instead of trying to utilize localization to localize string to have some automation over that, what you then instead could do, and we're going to do that for this plugin for now, is to, or not this one, is to kind of hard code this bit. So where I had added jästä laatikko in Finnish, then have here your own switch where you check rhino.ui.localization.current language identifier. I believe it was, or just language identifier, I guess, and look at the language code ID that's returned by that, and then at least you should be able to detect those languages that the user has actually installed. So the ones that installer provides for you. And I think for me in this particular project, I'm definitely going to read up a little bit more on localization and how to utilize the tools that are in Rhino Common, because to me it does not make sense to have this be something that each developer, plugin developer, has to implement separately themselves. We just need to figure out just where to place the XML files such that it gets loaded by Rhino the moment our plugin gets loaded. So let's maybe look at our documentation, because that's still always the best place to look for information. Let's look at our plugin class. Maybe there, maybe it has some information about loading resources like this. Let's see. There are here some classes about licensing, plugins, some delegates for helping figure out different bits and pieces, and some enumerations. Nothing stands out there. Let's look at plugin. And here we have some basic stuff. A local plugin name. We don't have that yet, but we could do Yester Live code also in different languages as the plugin name. Settings, nothing useful there. Maybe some overrides that we could set about. Commands, create commands. So this is something Rhino calls while loading. Anything about localization here? Let's check plugin info in a moment. Load compute extensions. Why we don't do that? Document settings. No, it doesn't look like anything useful in this class. So maybe get plugin info has something useful here. No, nothing useful. Plugin info gives us just very basic stuff. It's the attributes you can set at the begin or in your project, and that data gets populated into these properties. As see, these are only read-only access. More ideas. Let's go check again Rhino UI. Localization. Maybe there's a way for us to load a file or something like that. No, not really. So maybe instead of doing this one, there's here this localized string which has this one. So let's try this one still. So we are going to use assembly dot. Well, we are going to figure out what our own assembly is. Executing assembly, I believe it's called, and pass that in to localized string. So maybe that's going to work. Who knows? Time to find out, right? So we are going to the beginning of our command, creating a command. Let's do this a bit bigger like this. We are having our command here, first name, and I guess in this case we are doing then a little bit more elaborate code. So I'm going to put here a get accessor. Get. Oh man, that one I needed, and then let's return that string. Let's do first that, and then we fix up the code so that we actually look at the assembly code. I mean, we pass in the assembly we are in at the moment. So and so, that would be a assembly. Assembly is going to be assembly executing assembly, I believe. Let's ask the internet. Oh, let's ask the internet, because the internet knows everything. A C# getting executing assembly. Let's show that here. Get executing assembly method, and we need to have access to system.reflection. Right. Right, so let's type down we need the assembly object for our plugin to pass on to the localization system. Well, that is at least what we think right now. Get executing assembly. For this we also need access to the system.reflection assembly, right? So let's also add that. That is going to be C# colon, no, that's not a colon, colon first command usings, I believe it was, equals, and then the extension for that. That's going to be using system reflection. Let's generate that. Oh, and then we of course need to pass on that assembly object here. Well, the one good thing about this particular stream is that I now know how hard this is, and I should make an effort to figure out how this actually works and make sure it's documented properly, at least with this live code document. There's now a trace of this. Alright, how did it actually work? I have Rhino open here. Have I been running the wrong Rhino? Oh no, this was the Rhino because I wanted to figure out where the well, let's do it this way, where the files were going to be put, but kind of failed that a little bit. Oh, well, let's do it this way. So just cycles, because I recognize that. Now we have this one. We go do. Was this a smart thing? Not really. So I guess the easiest way is to do edit Python script, and then going to run. Let's do an empty script. Import rhino.ui. Oh, actually import Rhino, and then do rhino.application settings. A good thing I know how to code, and then language identifier is, let's set it to 1033, because I know English but not Czech language. Sorry about that to all the Czechs. So that was that. Let's quickly restart it just to verify Neocladat, I guess that means cancel. Let's see if we are now on English. I did press the button, right? Did I? Oh yes, it's just being a little bit slow because it's changing again. Language. Rhino, Rhino, Rhino. Oh, everything in something I can understand. That was my actual Rhino install, and now let's load Rhino debug version. That still should be in finish mode. So we are now passing in this different or we're using the different version of the localization string. So we're oh yes, well, let's see how this fares, right? Shall we? So I think we need one thing that I actually just now realized is that maybe the loading doesn't work because maybe it was not loaded yet. Let's see. Restore load plugin. It says yesterbox here. It still says yesterbox. This is not going that well with the localization. We know we are able to change the string there, or I mean use the localization name, the local name, so to say. But at the moment, I'm a bit stumped about how this localization is supposed to work. Again, my understanding is that having the XML file over here next to the plugin should work, but it doesn't. So, recap of this stream: not much success in actual getting the automated part work, as in this localize string part. I have to figure out why, and I will do that. But we have set up the code for this, and we did do some investigation, a bit of investigation in how Rhino determines what languages for Rhino are installed. If you managed to forget at this point, let's have a quick look at the program data folder. So we are going to type %program data %McNeil, right? And then under Rhinoceros, the 7 in your case, but I'm running now the debug version of my own builds. But on the packages are these files with this specific encoding of the locale name, and Rhino will figure out that if it finds this file, it will assume that it's actually installed. Actually, one thing that now I'm interested in is, does this name actually show up in the UI? So let's quickly see. Tools, options, and then under appearance, yes, wow, so the names do appear here. So I should be able to change to Dutch, and internally Rhino thinks that it's on Dutch. So this packages folder is how Rhino knows what files are installed, I mean languages. Okay, well, we can always win, I guess, but I hope we have learned a lot about how Rhino works. So next stream we will definitely, or one of the next streams, we definitely will revisit this topic and make sure that our localization is going to work properly. On my behalf, I'll be doing some off-screen testing, like testing with an empty file where the RHI is supposed to be, and so on. But let's see how this is going to work. On that note, I'm going to thank all those who have been watching, and next time in the future we will make this work. We just need to learn. Have a good weekend, or a week, end of the week, and see you next time.